Wits University says efforts are underway to develop a new generation of vaccines that will be more effective against the COVID-19 variant found here in South Africa. In a statement released this afternoon, the university says the AstraZeneca vaccine provides minimal protection against mild and moderate cases of the 501Y.V2 variant. This is the same vaccine that arrived in South Africa at the beginning of the month and is due to be administered to healthcare workers in the next few days. Wits University's Professor Shabir Mahdi heads up the vaccine trial here in South Africa. He spoke to my colleague Sally Badet about this on Friday evening.
The current generation of vaccines might not be what we require to get to herd immunity as quickly as possible, but at least what they would do is offer protection against severe disease. So we might well need to recalibrate our expectations of the current generation of COVID-19s because of the evolution of these mutants, which certainly are resistant to immunity conferred by past infection or immune responses induced by past infection. And there's also drop-off in terms of the effectiveness of immune response that are being generated by the current generation of vaccines. So there's going to be some drop-off in terms of efficacy, but I remain optimistic that they would at least still be able to protect against severe disease and moderate illness.
For more on this, I am now joined by Mark Heywood, who is the editor of Maverick Citizen. Thank you very much, Mark, for speaking to us this afternoon. Why haven't we heard yet from the National Department of Health on such a critical and concerning issue when we've been speaking to Professor Shabir Mahdi and to AstraZeneca themselves on the efficacy of their vaccine on the 501Y variant for the past few days?
Well, as I understand it, the Department of Health and the Minister of Health will be holding a press conference at 7 o'clock this evening to explain the implications of this latest research on the AstraZeneca vaccine. And I think that we'll hope to get answers and some ideas about how they are going to manage this. I think what we have to keep in mind is that the news about the minimal effect of this vaccine, in fact, only broke publicly in the middle of last night. In fact, it was reported for the first time by the Financial Times in London at about 2 o'clock this morning. So things have happened fast in the course of Sunday, but I think that the department can be forgiven for not responding just yet. But what they say this evening will be very, very important.
Messaging is absolutely critical when it comes to dealing with public perception at a time when vaccine hesitancy is growing, if anything else. How have we seen governments and countries across the world trying to deal with the fact that the vaccine, the virus is mutating, but we're still dealing with vaccines developed for the first generation or early virus variants?
Well, as you say, messaging is absolutely crucial. And it's absolutely crucial that the public, every person in every country, is kept abreast of developments in vaccines as things take place, just as you are doing now. The difficulty that we have is that COVID-19 is a moving target. It's a virus that is mutating, as all viruses do. As you correctly said, most of the first vaccines that we know are efficacious were developed against what scientists call the wild type of the virus, the very first form of the virus, shape of the virus that emerged. But in South Africa and in other countries of the world, we now have these mutations. And what's the research that is coming out still today and has been published by Wits shows is that some of these vaccines may not be effective against the mutations. But even there, I think it's very important for us to study what the scientists and what the science is showing us very, very carefully. So, for example, with this vaccine today, it seems clear from the research that the vaccine does not work against mild or moderate COVID-19. But it's uncertain still, and scientists believe it's quite possible that it may work against more severe forms of the disease, hospitalization and death and mortality due to the disease. So these are critical issues. and vaccine literacy, popular understanding, is going to be critical in the days and months and probably years as we travel this journey.
I think for most people, having gone through months of lockdown, big changes in terms of how we interact with each other, big expectations from government in terms of our behavior. The changes might not be huge. Wearing a mask is not tiresome or difficult, but it is a big change from how we are used to socializing with each other. So I think most people expected the vaccine, and I say the vaccine in its entirety, to be a form of a silver bullet, to put to bed any of these what we're experiencing as difficult or tiresome requirements on the broader public. How are we going to have to change our expectations along with how this virus is changing and how we need to react to it?
Well, look, the first thing is that we are going to have to change our expectations. Even if we have a successful vaccine rollout, that rollout could take up to 12 months to get to the 67% of the population that we need to reach to get to population or herd immunity, as it's called. Whilst we roll the vaccine out, I'm afraid that we are going to have to continue with all of the precautions that we have been used to: social distancing, proper hand hygiene, mask wearing. I'm afraid that none of this is going to go away in the short term, and we must accept that, and we must adapt to it. A vaccine will be a silver bullet in the sense that it's a pharmaceutical intervention that best offers us the opportunity of breaking this epidemic. But a silver bullet, unfortunately, doesn't do the job with one shot, if you like, to take the metaphor. It's going to require a combination of mass vaccination with efficacious vaccines side by side, with all of us continuing to play our part by taking individual actions to try to control COVID and prevent both ourselves being infected as well as ourselves infecting other people.
Mark, apart from the efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine on our variant, there's also concern about the expiry date on the AstraZeneca vaccine doses that have just arrived in South Africa. Tell us a bit more.
Well, it has been reported, and again, I think the Department of Health and SAPRA, the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, will have to confirm this, that the batch of 1 million doses that we received just a week ago would have expired in April. This would have been a problem because it would have meant that we would have had to use all of those vaccines before April. And we'd also have to keep in mind that the AstraZeneca vaccine is a vaccine that requires a double dose. So people who may have received the vaccine in a week's time would then have to come back a few weeks later for a second vaccine. So this is an issue, but I would say at the moment that it's become a secondary issue because the news that we now have about the minimal effect of this vaccine that we now have in the country is going to require government to develop a new plan about how we're going to commence our vaccination program. And it's not obviously for me to preempt what government decides to do, but this news that we are talking about is very, very disappointing and also very, very important about what are the next steps that we take as a country. I should also say that this is not just a problem for South Africa. You know, a great deal of store has been placed on the AstraZeneca vaccine and its efficacy, particularly by developing countries all over the world. And if this mutation, this strain of the virus, this variant of the virus is widespread beyond South Africa, then there are huge implications for the global effort at vaccination.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. We're going to leave it right there.